The two Koreas are ushering in the new year with a fresh war of words, dampening hopes for a thaw in tensions in the near future. So what was President Yoon's message for 2024? Why is North Korea's Kim Jong-un ramping up his bellicose rhetoric? And given these events, what are the prospects of regional security? Hello and welcome to the year's first episode of Issues and Insiders. It's Tuesday afternoon here in Korea and I'm Sunhee. Today we have our panel of foreign journalists and their take on the latest events on the Korean Peninsula. I have Jacco Zwetsloot here in the studio with me. Jacco, Happy New Year and welcome back.
Happy New Year. Thank you for having me back again.
I also have Andres Sanchez Braun with us. Andres, Happy New Year as well. It's good to have you online.
Happy New Year to you too. Thanks for having us here.
Right. Jacco, let's begin with details of President Yoon's New Year's address this year. What was the gist of his message and its relevance?
Yes, I read through the whole speech yesterday. He acknowledged that last year had been a difficult year, but said that Korea was one of the fastest countries in the world to lay the foundation for a recovery and growth. And he pointed to some successes of last year that his administration had in maintaining sound fiscal principles and promoting industrial growth. And then he moved on to this year and he said this year will be a turning point in Korea's new leap forward, he used that phrase, and pledged to ensure that vulnerable members of society also feel the benefits of economic recovery. And so he went through a few points there. He pledged to continue to root out corruption and cartels, to expand people's freedom and improve their welfare and create a fair society, but gave no details on how. Domestically, he pointed to structural reforms that will are to take place in the fields of labour, education and the national pension system. Also, he wants to find a problem, we've talked about before on this show, to the low birth rate, but acknowledged that there is no easy fix. Which is true. Then he highlighted positive developments in the Republic of Korea-US alliance and Korea-Japan relations in the last year and talked about building a genuine and lasting peace through strength and building a strong defense system to defend against North Korean nuclear and missile threats with an advanced deterrent system. And he pledged to protect the citizens of South Korea and also the institutions of South Korea from various cyber threats, including those of North Korea. Now, what's the relevance of the message? It's the sort of encouraging words that any leader of a state says at the beginning of a year. He didn't mention the National Assembly elections that are coming up in April, even though I'm sure that they're somewhere near the front of his mind. So he pointed to good things that his administration has done and the good things that it hopes to do, probably hoping that that will reflect well in the National Assembly elections in April. But he didn't say much about North Korea except in the field, in the area of it being a threat that needs to be deterred against.
Right. Andres, what were your takeaways from President Yoon's first address to the public for the year 2024?
Well, I'd say three takeaways from this speech. I think one of the things was that President Yoon insisted that the new so-called framework for deterrence against North Korea will be ready by around June this year. This meaning the new extended deterrence mechanism, the extended deterrence, as we've mentioned before, is the system by which the United States protects South Korea from a hypothetical attack from North Korea. And since last year, since the summit that President Yoon and President Biden had in Washington in April last year, this extended deterrence framework includes also the so-called nuclear option through the creation of this so-called nuclear consultative group that held its second meeting in December. And it was announced that this new a more complete framework that includes nuclear options would be established by June this year. Now, that would be one of the main takeaways, in my opinion. The other two actually were also mentioned by Jacco. President Yoon talked about how he feels that he regrets that many Koreans have been suffering because of, say, high inflation, high interest rates, increased prices of fuel, for example, or the scarcity of affordable housing, which is a long-term problem in Korea and in other major economies. And as Jacco already pointed out, he said his government would do the utmost to try to make the economic growth of Korea reach every corner of society. Then the third point, in my opinion, would be the other long-standing problem that Korea suffers and that we've mentioned in the show before, which is the low fertility rate, which is the lowest in the world among developed economies. President Yoon said that his government will try to find a solution to this issue. He said that time's running out and that there need to be creative options. But then again, he did not really share what some of these creative options his government has to come up with could be.
Right, but he did talk about how it was important that is to address the birth rate through by thinking outside the box, I believe. Yes. The birth rate, of course, is also a problem for North Korea, where its leader Kim Jong-un addressed his officials, also ahead of the new year, with some very perturbing pledges, if I may. Jacco, could you tell us a bit about them?
Yes, Kim Jong-un wrapped up a 5-day plenum meeting of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea by meeting with some military leaders on Sunday. During that meeting, he said that if the enemy, meaning the United States and also South Korea, opt for military confrontation, that the Korean People's Army should deal a deadly blow using the toughest means without a moment's hesitation in order to thoroughly annihilate them. So very, very strong words. He then said that war could break out at any time, that it's closer than ever, and announced plans to build up military development in 2024, including launching 3 more military reconnaissance satellites, launching some new aerial drones, and strengthening electronic warfare capabilities. Now, as well as, of course, as we had last year, the boosting of nuclear and missile defenses or offenses. And he said that his country is not interested in reunifying with this Korea here in the South now or at any time in the future.
Right, and keeping in mind these remarks by Kim Jong-un, Andres, would you agree with pundits who believe that we are indeed looking ahead to a turbulent year this year?
Well, unfortunately, it's always difficult to anticipate what could happen, especially given the lack of transparency of the North Korean regime. But as Jacco already pointed out, all that has been said by Kim Jong-un after this meeting with high military ranks or at the closing of the party plenum does sound pretty much in line with what we've been seeing since the conversations for denuclearization went south in 2019. This is Kim Jong-un announcing that he wants to launch another 3 satellites this year to improve his spying capabilities on military movements on South Korea and the U.S., improving nuclear and missile capabilities, etc. All this, of course, and the fact that Pyongyang has gotten closer to Beijing or Moscow, especially at a time when Moscow is engaged in its war in Ukraine, definitely signals that this seems to be another turbulent year in the Korean Peninsula, definitely.
Right. Jacco, some claim that Kim Jong-un's hardline rhetoric simply seeks to shift the focus away from the regime's economic hardships, while others claim that he may indeed be preparing for some form of hostile confrontation. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's important to see the words in the context of the strong words that both Kim Jong-un has used previously and his father before him. So people with long memories will recall similar words and phrases used in the past. And that doesn't mean that they're empty words, but it means that there's really not much that we can know for sure until words turn into actions. They're certainly not good words or good pledges, and they do set an ugly tone for inter-Korean relations into 2024, but people shouldn't feel too nervous just yet. Now, as to whether this rhetoric is simply to shift the focus away from domestic economic difficulties, I think this is a technique that North Korea has used for a long time. It's not something they just dreamed up a month ago. It's been used for years, even decades. It appears to be a basic strategy of the North to deflect attention to the enemy just outside the gates. You know, if you can make people look at the enemy that's about to attack you from outside, then that tends to clarify the mind a little bit and to get people worried less about domestic problems back home and shift the focus to the enemy outside. So is Kim Jong-un preparing for some military confrontation? It's possible, but it seems unlikely. Of course, Ukraine, we have almost 2 years into that war now. It's a great example that Pyongyang can learn from. Taking over territory is not an easy thing if the local populace are against it. Now, when North Korea launched its all-out war back in June 1950, that wasn't off the back of angry rhetoric. In fact, it was during a time when North and South Korea were negotiating for a prisoner exchange, and then came the war as a surprise. So North Korea doesn't have a reputation of threatening and then acting with a strong strike. So I think it could be a signal to his domestic audience. It could be a signal to the world that he wants to be left alone, or it could be a combination of both. Only time will tell.
Right. Meanwhile, prior to these remarks by Kim Jong-un, President Yoon here in South Korea, Andres, also engaged in some tough rhetoric of his own during a visit to a frontline army unit, I believe, last week. Now, he called on soldiers here to retaliate first and report later in the case of a North Korean attack. What, Andres, are the broader implications of these words on regional stability, do you think?
Well, these are, it's important to point out that these are also strong words from President Yoon. But at the same time, I think he's trying to match at some level the strong rhetoric that we hear from North Korea continuously, and especially in the past year, we've heard Kim Jong-un and top-rank officials from the regime point out that a war is literally impending on the Korean Peninsula. So, in my opinion, I think President Yoon was trying to match this narrative somehow with these strong words. I don't think he really intended to send a message to the military that they have to be hot-headed, of course, but. I think he was trying to make a point, and he actually also mentioned that North Korea, he said, I should remind you that North Korea is the only country in the world that includes the use of nuclear weapons in its constitution, as well as the goal of invading the South, which it considers to be occupied territory. So I think he was just trying to make a point in this case of how serious the situation is, at least in when it comes to tension and military buildup in the peninsula. But let's just hope that that this just ends up being just that, words.
Right, let's just hope, of course. Andre, shifting gears now. On the local political arena, we received some very unsettling news earlier on this Tuesday. Opposition leader Lee Jae-myung, he was stabbed while on a visit to Busan, speaking to reporters. I understand you've been following this event, that is. What is the latest, Andres, on that front?
Yes, very, very, very unsettling news, horrifying images. South Korea's main opposition party, Lee Jae-myung, was touring what is supposed to be the facility where the future airport in Busan will be built in Gadok Island. He was surrounded by reporters at that point when a man, apparently in his 60s or 70s, a man who was wearing also a crown, apparently that said, that had handwritten, "I am Lee Jae-myung." Apparently this man made his way through the reporters and asked Mr. Lee for an autograph. And at that moment, apparently, by surprise, he stabbed him on the left side of the neck. Now, Mr. Lee was moved to Busan National University Hospital, where he received emergency treatment. But his party actually has reported that he has been transferred to Seoul National University Hospital in the capital for surgery, given that there seems to be extensive damage to the jugular vein. The jugular vein, as you know, is a vital organ that moves blood from the head to the heart. And apparently Mr. Lee has sustained heavy blood loss, according to his party, and will receive surgery at Seoul National University, as we just mentioned. The man was arrested on site, the attacker, but the police said that apparently he's not talking just yet about his apparent motivation behind this this horrifying attack. So for now, we can only hope that Mr. Lee is capable to recover and he recovers as fast as possible.
Right, indeed, which is something that President Yoon has also called for. In the meantime, Jacco, generally speaking, how do such random acts of violence, especially against politicians during periods of elections, affect voter sentiment, do you think?
Yeah, generally speaking, South Korea is a peaceful place to live, and these kind of instances of political violence, attacks against individuals are thankfully quite rare, and there's so few incidents of that in the last 20 years that we can go and review a couple of them now. First of all, I was thinking about when Park Geun-hye was attacked. She was the chairwoman of the Grand National Party. She was slashed in her face in 2006 by a man with a box cutter. Afterwards, her family won the Daejeon mayoral election, even though it had been trailing by a big margin before the attack. The Grand National Party performed very well in the period that Park Geun-hye was the chair, from 2004 to 2006. So although it's hard to say whether the attack helped, it certainly didn't hurt her party's political chances at the time. And of course, later on, she was elected as, or voted into the presidency. And then the US ambassador, the ambassador to Korea, Mark Lippert, was attacked in January 2015 by a member of a progressive cultural organization opposed to the Korean War. And that attack led to an outpouring of support for the US ambassador to Korea, apologies from Korea on behalf of that individual, and condemnation of the attacker, who is still in jail and is not scheduled for release until 2027. And his group doesn't seem to have grown in influence since then. So there was a real backlash against that action. And then more recently, in March 2022, so almost 2 years ago, just 2 days before the South Korean presidential election, Minju Democratic Party chair Song Yong-gil was attacked with a hammer while he was campaigning for Lee Jae-myung at the time, interestingly. Soon after, Mr. Song stood for the mayor of Seoul in the election, but he lost to Oh Se-hun, so the attack certainly did not help him to win that election. So really all we can say for sure is that South Koreans, generally speaking, are very much opposed to the idea of political violence and attacking politicians, and they deplore such acts. So I imagine that the reaction will be similar in this case too. It's a horrible thing to see happen in Korea.
Right, indeed. Moving forward, Jacco, how do brewing tensions between the two Koreas then look to affect perhaps the outcome of the general elections coming up this April?
Yeah, I don't see that inter-Korea relations or tensions are a major factor in the general elections in April. Ordinarily, if a government is perceived as effectively managing tensions or making progress in diplomatic relations with North Korea, it may gain support from swing voters. But since we haven't seen any kinetic action, I'm talking about whether that be shooting, shelling or missile strikes between the two Koreas, some voters will look at that and say, well, look, President Yoon has been able to keep a lid on the tensions. But others who are more favorable to dialogue and friendly relations with North Korea will look at Yoon's record and see that he's failed. And so really how people see the issue is more often a reflection of their own political tendency rather than the way that things are now. But I don't see swing voters making a decision in April based on how inter-Korean relations are now. It's simply one of a number of factors, and more pressing things will be things like inflation, the economy, education policy, the plan to increase the birth rate, things like that that affect people's daily quality of life. Those will be more front of mind than inter-Korean relations. I say that now, we've got 3 months to go, things may change.
Right, indeed. And Andres, speaking simply as a foreign journalist, perhaps observing the events as they unfold, how does fragmentation within Korea's major political parties look to perhaps affect the outcome of the upcoming legislative election?
Yes, well, they definitely do not speak well to voters. We've seen both major parties, the Minju Democratic Party and the ruling People's Power Party, go through important issues in the past few months. In the case of the People's Power Party, we just saw that Mr. Kim Gi-hyun had to step down as the leader of the party, as polls were showing that this bloc wasn't showing much popularity in the polls ahead of the April election. and Mr. Han Do-hoon, the ex-justice minister, was stepped up as the leader, as the new leader of the party. This is another man who's considered to be a strong ally of President Yoon. Seems to be sending that kind of message. As Jacco said, there's still 3 months to go. A lot of things can happen, but definitely it seems like in this case, the People's Power Party is trying to, redraw its image in this case and have a little more favorable light shine on it ahead of the election. In the case of the Minju Democratic Party, we've had this past year all the issues surrounding precisely Mr. Lee Jae-myung, the fact that the National Assembly, controlled by his party, finally voted in favor of him losing his immunity so that he could be investigated on alleged corruption cases during his tenure as the mayor of Sejong and as the governor of Gyeonggi-do. Then again, we don't know what's going to happen here. There's been lots of talk in the past few weeks or even days about if Mr. Lee was going to step down as the main leader, as the leader of the main opposition party. And now we've had this horrifying incident where he's been attacked, he's been stabbed in the neck, and there's a lot of things we don't know right now. If Mr. Lee will recover, if he will be fit even to continue his political career at this point, unfortunately. So a lot of questions open for the few next months ahead of this legislative election, certainly.
Yeah, and I'm wondering whether Lee Na-kyung is going to leave the party and found his own that he's been talking about. It's supposed to have happened this week. Right. Will that attack now cause a rethink? Sometimes the people tend to circle the wagon and say, well, now we all have to band together because of this.
Well, it's a developing story. I suppose, like you said earlier, time will tell then. For now then, Jacco, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you for having me.
And Andres, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you for having us here.
Right, well, that ends this edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching, and be sure to join us again same time tomorrow.